In the spring of 1932, America was a country caught between two eras. The Jazz Age glow of the Roaring Twenties had dimmed into the gray shadow of the Great Depression. Yet amid hardship and uncertainty, one name still symbolized hope, adventure, and pride. Charles Lindbergh, the man who had crossed the Atlantic alone and united a nation in awe. He was a hero, a living legend, and in the public's imagination he seemed untouchable. But late one cold March night, that illusion shattered forever, as a crime unfolded that would haunt America for generations: the kidnapping and murder of his baby son. It began quietly. On the evening of March, the Lindbergh estate, tucked deep in the woods of Hopewell, New Jersey, stood in near complete silence. The home, still under construction, was meant to be a private retreat for the Lindbergh family. Charles, his wife Anne, and their 20-month-old son Charles Jr. But the house's isolation, far from the bustle of nearby towns, would soon prove deadly. Inside, the baby had been put to bed early, tucked into his crib on the second floor. A nurse and the child's mother checked on him at around 9 p.m. Everything seemed normal. Yet less than an hour later, a horrifying discovery was made. The crib was empty. A small, chilling note was left on the windowsill, written in poor English and marked with odd circles and holes. It read, "Dear Sir, have $50,000 ready. We warn you not to call the police or the press. If you do, we will kill the baby." Outside, investigators found muddy footprints leading away from the window and a crudely built wooden ladder lying in 3 pieces below it. It appeared someone had used it to climb up to the nursery window and take the child. But how could that be possible without anyone hearing a sound? The kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby spread through the nation like wildfire. Radio broadcasts interrupted regular programming. Newspapers printed extra editions through the night. Every corner of America, from city apartments to small rural towns, buzzed with disbelief and fear. The crime of the century, as it would soon be called, had begun. As police and reporters swarmed the Lindbergh home, details began to emerge. The ladder appeared to have been built by hand, possibly from wood found near the property. The ransom note's handwriting was unusual, shaky, inconsistent, but deliberate. The kidnapper seemed to know who the family was, and perhaps where they lived. But despite hundreds of officers searching the grounds and surrounding woods, there was no trace of the missing child. Lindbergh himself, desperate and determined, took control of the investigation, working closely with police and even talking to underworld figures through intermediaries, hoping someone might have information. Over the following weeks, a string of letters arrived at the Lindbergh home, each more demanding and cryptic than the last. The ransom amount was raised to $70,000, and instructions were given for a secret handover. Through a series of coded messages and anonymous go-betweens, a drop was finally arranged in April. The intermediary, Dr. John Condon, a retired Bronx school teacher who had inserted himself into the case, delivered the ransom in gold certificates to a man claiming to be the kidnapper, known only as John. In exchange, the man provided a note with directions to where the baby could supposedly be found. But the directions led nowhere. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to fade. On May 12, 1932, 10 agonizing weeks after the kidnapping, a truck driver pulled over on a rural road just a few miles from the Lindbergh estate. In the woods nearby, he found the remains of a small child, partially buried under leaves. It was Charles Lindbergh Jr. The cause of death was a violent blow to the head. He had been dead for weeks, likely killed the same night he was taken. The nation's hope turned to grief, and grief turned to fury. With the ransom money still missing, and the killer at large, the case grew colder by the month. But the ransom payment held the key. The gold certificates were marked and traceable. Over the next 2 years, small amounts began surfacing in New York City, at gas stations, grocery stores and taverns. Each time one appeared, investigators rushed to trace its origin. Then in September 1934, A bank teller recorded the license plate of a man who had used one of the marked bills. The plate led to a German immigrant carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann, living in the Bronx. When police searched Hauptmann's home, they found a wooden floorboard in his attic that matched the wood used in the kidnap ladder. Even more damning, over $14,000 of the ransom money was hidden inside a box in his garage. He denied everything, claiming he had found the money left by a friend, but the evidence against him mounted quickly. The handwriting on the ransom notes appeared to match his. His background, too, raised suspicion. A prior conviction for armed robbery in Germany. The trial of Bruno Hauptmann in 1935 was a media circus unlike anything the world had seen. Reporters from across the globe filled the tiny courtroom in Flemington, New Jersey. Flashbulbs exploded. The public, desperate for justice, had already made up its mind. Lindbergh himself took the stand, testifying that he recognized Hauptmann's voice as the man he heard the night of the ransom handover. The jury deliberated for only 11 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Bruno Richard Hauptmann was sentenced to death. On April 3, 1936, he was executed in the electric chair at Trenton State Prison, still proclaiming his innocence to the end. But as the years passed, doubts began to surface. Critics questioned the reliability of the evidence. The ladder wood, though similar, was not a perfect match. The handwriting analysis, now considered imprecise, could have been flawed, and the ransom notes written in broken English seemed unlike Hauptmann's known writing style. Was he a lone culprit, or merely a convenient scapegoat in a nation desperate for closure? Charles Lindbergh, unable to bear the scrutiny and tragedy, withdrew from public life, eventually moving his family abroad. The crime that had once made him a hero had now left him broken. Anne Morrow Lindbergh, his wife, turned inward, writing haunting reflections on loss and grief. And the American public, still reeling, began to question not just the man who stood accused, but the system that had delivered him to the chair. Decades later, new theories emerged that there may have been multiple people involved, possibly even someone inside the Lindbergh household. Others suggested the kidnapping had gone wrong, that the child's death was accidental. But without modern forensic evidence, those questions remain forever unanswered. The Lindbergh kidnapping remains a wound in American history, a story of fame, tragedy, and the terrifying vulnerability that lurks even behind the grandest wall. It exposed the dark undercurrent of obsession, envy, and desperation that can twist human nature in the face of power and privilege. To this day, when people speak of the crime of the century, they don't just recall the ladder, the ransom notes, or the courtroom drama. They remember the haunting silence of that child's empty crib, a silence that still echoes through the decades, reminding us that even the mightiest names cannot escape the shadows that lie just beyond the light.